Chuck Liddell and Tito Ortiz are the two biggest names in UFC history, both bringing fun, exciting fights, a big personality, and ushering in the UFC as a major contender in sports and fighting. In fact, both men had current UFC president Dana White as their agent, and both came up from Southern California and the Southern California fight scene. In fact, the two men seemed like friends for a brief time, according to multiple sources. However, that's where their similarities end, and similarly, their friendship. Chuck Liddell was a kickboxing knockout artist, while Tito Ortiz was a big brawler with a wrestling background. Chuck Liddell was a silent fighter who let his fights do the talking, while Tito Ortiz was a showman, showboating after putting his opponents straight to sleep. Chuck was the Iceman, wearing ice on his shorts, while Tito Ortiz wore flames. The friends turned enemies became polar opposites, causing bad blood, producing legendary fights, and hurting each other's egos along the way. In this famous feud, we explore the clashes between these two MMA greats and the fallout and collateral damage done by the rivalry between the two MMA legends. Chuck Liddell started his career as a young man fighting in the amateur kickboxing leagues, where he won all 22 of his fights. This put him on the map and led him to signing a contract with the UFC. After signing, he had to prove to himself that he could fight in multiple formats, strangely enough fighting in a bare-knuckles brawl in Brazil, later being the UFC's representative for Pride, which was another international fighting league. He fared well, but he met some tough opponents, facing them with, well, varying levels of success. Eventually, Liddell would return to the UFC as a big-name superstar in 2004 to meet his biggest rival yet, Tito Ortiz. They met on April 2nd, 2004 at UFC 2004. In the 2 rounds that the fight went, it was an absolute slugfest, with Chuck Liddell coming out on top after a TKO. Still, Tito Ortiz claims that Liddell poked his eye, leaving him temporarily blinded and unable to defend himself. This is still debated to this day, but one thing is for certain, it added flames and fire between Ortiz and the Iceman. Ortiz had a life filled with struggles before the UFC. He bounced around juvenile systems, used many types of drugs, and was a very violent kid, until he was able to turn his energy and pain into a new passion, wrestling. He wrestled in college and actually began his career as an amateur in the UFC fighting system without any money at stake. Within 2 years, Ortiz went from fighting as a college amateur to fighting Frank Shamrock for the UFC Light Heavyweight Championship, ultimately losing, but putting him on the map as a young stud. A year later, Ortiz gained the light heavy title over Vanderlei Silva and held that title until 2003, one of the longest title defenses in UFC history. He would eventually lose to Randy Couture and take the first fight against Liddell.
Tito covers up. Chuck continues to Tito. Combination. Uppercut. Chuck is on the head.
Still, Ortiz wanted revenge for his loss to Liddell. They fought again, this time no excuses. Both fighters still in their primes, both knew the game plan, and both wanted to do one thing: win, and with style. The fight took place on December 30th, 2006. It was an absolutely brutal fight, and it went back and forth, with Liddell playing defense against Ortiz's ground game. The Huntington Beach bad boy would eventually get Liddell on the ground, but Liddell's defense was too powerful, TKOing Ortiz in the 3rd round of the bout. The fight did some serious damage to Liddell. After the fight, it was shown that he actually tore his MCL prior to the fight during training, and then he popped a tendon in his left middle finger during the fight itself. This story seemed to be over. Both men had their dislikes, but it seemed like both men would move on into their careers, or at least until retirement. And Liddell did just that, retiring in the early 2010s, while Ortiz fought around in minor league MMA circuits with marginal success. That was until 2018, when both men decided they wanted to go one more round in the octagon. This time though, neither fighter was in their prime, Liddell being a whopping 49 years old and Ortiz being 42. The fight didn't have much action until out of nowhere, Ortiz struck Liddell with force, ending the fight and career of Chuck Liddell on a rather sad note. Sure, maybe Ortiz didn't get the respect he deserved while being on top, compared to his friend-turned-enemy Chuck. And in his prime, Chuck was probably the better fighter. Many fans adored the Iceman because of his relaxed antics and laid-back demeanor, and despised Ortiz for being what some would consider too cocky. But to Ortiz, he finally had his sweet victory over his nemesis, ending this bitter rivalry in the best way he could, by finally winning and melting the dreams of a comeback of the Iceman. Guys, let us know what you think in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to Famous Feuds. We have a bunch of new videos coming out very soon, and we're super excited to share this channel with you. Don't forget to subscribe, and let us know what you think in the comments below.